Hey everyone, this is Steve Weintraub with Collider, and we are here at the Toronto Film Festival at the Cinema Center, which is being sponsored by Range Rover Sport. I want to give a huge thank you to Range Rover for helping us support cinema at the Toronto Film Festival. I really say thank you. Now, jumping into you guys, I really want to start with congratulations on the film and being at the Toronto Film Festival with it. But before we get into the film, I do have some individual questions, and they are directed at you, if you do not mind.
Not at all.
So let's start with the most important thing, which is your early work on The Nanny. Back...
You have done your research.
Yes. I like to come with some curveballs at the beginning. So what did it mean to you or in the 90s to be on that show?
Do you know, Fran was a great supporter of the Elton John AIDS Foundation, and she always came to our Oscar parties. And at that time, the first Elton documentary I had done, Tantrums and Tiaras, had just gone out on HBO. And Fran came to me with this crazy idea that she would be the woman on the tennis court in the south of France who says yoo-hoo to Elton, which results in that enormous tantrum, and to put it into an episode of The Nanny. And it just seemed like so much fun. We loved Fran, and it gave a chance to give the film a bit of profile. So that was actually a really wonderful experience, and I'm really thrilled that you know all about it.
Now let's talk about the next thing, which is also in 2015, you were named one of GQ's 50 best dressed men in Britain. What did that mean to you? And did you feel like you had to step your game up the last 9 years?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved clothes and fashion. It was nice to be recognized. I don't like putting too much emphasis on that kind of stuff because, I think my mother always raised me to say it's what's inside that counts.
Sure.
And so that's where the focus has to be.
I wore a tie for you. I'm trying to step my game up today.
I guess the nice thing was I got a few discounts at some stores. So that was actually pretty cool to wear people's clothes. So that was nice.
Sure. You have done, I'm going to switch now. You have done
few.
So many films that I would recommend, but there's going to be people out there who've never seen your work before. If they haven't, what's like the one that you want them starting with?
Oh gosh, it's like picking a favorite child, but
well, you can name 2 or 3 if you want.
The Billie Eilish, The World's a Little Blurry, which is on Apple TV Plus, is a film I'm incredibly proud of, and we started filming with Billie when she was 16 years old. And ended right after her 18th birthday, and it's a film that's very near and dear to my heart.
It's fantastic, and B, you also never know when you start filming with someone that young where it's all going to go.
No, we didn't know. It's all cinema verite. We filmed with her. She, of course, filmed a lot of it on her phone. Her mom filmed, and it captures quite a journey of a young woman who's an extraordinary artist, and she's coming of age as a young woman, but also as the extraordinary artist she's become.
Completely. One of the other things, and we're about to get into the film, but Elton has so many incredible songs. And again, there's going to be people out there, young people especially, who might not have ever heard any of them. So what's the song or two that for each of you that they have to hear if they've never heard a song?
Well, I point people to the entire album, Man, Men Across the Water, but that song in particular.
And I am very fond of Someone Saved My Life Tonight. Because that's the first Elton song that really resonated for me when I heard it. And
yeah. And I would also say there's a one of his lesser known early albums, 11-17-70, which is a live album, is probably as good a live album as has ever been recorded, and it's amazing. It's weeks after the Troubadour. Elton performs at WPLJ, I think, in New York, or WNEW, and it's an incredible live album.
And never intended to be an album. It was the first kind of stereo broadcast of a live inside a radio station performance, and so many bootlegs were made on the back of it because it was such an amazing musical moment that in the end they said, look, we have to put this out as an album because people are bootlegging it so much. So thankfully it's been properly preserved.
11-17-70. There's a good day. That will go a day well spent.
I was also going to say that there's so many right answers. You know what I mean? It's just all right answers. We're about to get into the doc, but you have visited you've covered so many subjects through your career. How have you ever had the conversation of revisiting someone a decade later, or you know what I mean, like looking at the next chapter?
Sure. Well, with the War Room, we did. We revisited with the War Room, and if you look at the War Room, of course, is film made in 1992, directed by D.A. Pennebaker, the legendary D.A. Pennebaker and Chris Hedges. It's the first film I produced, and it's about James Carville and George Stephanopoulos, who were running Bill Clinton's first campaign for president in 1992, and 15 years later, we went back and we followed up with everybody. And if you look on the Criterion disc of the War Room, you'll see that film, The War Room Revisited. And it's very resonant, very rich. And
well, the reason I brought this up is because that was so effective, and there's so many other subjects you've covered.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, once you make a film, the experience is very complete in my experience. So you have, going back is like making a choice to make an entirely new film. And certainly we've considered it. I mean, with American High, that was a series, the first TV series that we did, a network television premium documentary back in the year 2000. And the kids then were 18 years old. So now they'd be, 24 plus 18, 42 years old.
That's what I mean.
And it would be really interesting to see them, but also, God bless them. They gave us their lives for a year. Let them live in peace.
I totally get it. You directed Tantrums and Tiaras back in '97. And so I'm curious, how much did you think about, like, how did it become a co-directing thing versus maybe you doing it on your own, or you doing it on, let's talk about that.
Tantrums was 94, 95 actually.
My bad.
That's
I wrote
okay,
down the wrong date.
But it didn't come out in America until 97 because I couldn't get anybody to pick it up and run it.
Okay, so I wasn't
which
all the
was
way
really
wrong.
interesting. Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't correct you.
No, just one. Sorry.
When that film at that time, everything in Elton's life was new to me, and the world was very unusual. And so picking up a home video camera, it was a Hi8 camera before even digital home video, gave me an opportunity to do what I called video therapy, to kind of go into the world and go into our relationship and things that puzzled me and things that challenged me and confronted me. And the camera gave me almost like a shield in a way to be able to ask Elton things and to confront things that I didn't think were normal or healthy or unusual. RJ is someone I have long admired, and we were put together about the prospect of working. I didn't want the full responsibility of doing what I'd hoped would be a landmark documentary about Elton's life on my own. I don't think I bring the right amount of experience, and I don't think I bring the objectivity, the full objectivity that's required as a filmmaker. On the other hand, I'm a really good barometer for what is truthful for Elton in terms of his life and his world, and when things are genuinely authentic. And so I wanted to collaborate. I wanted to work with someone where I could bring the skills that I had to someone who has terrific experience, amazing resources, an amazing team. I'm also manage Elton. And we were in the middle of going back. This was actually just before COVID, but we'd just come off the road from hugely successful tours in Australia, New Zealand. We'd been down there for 7 months. And we were back in LA. We had a coffee together at the San Vicente Bungalows. And it was the day before lockdown. But RJ was the only person I really spoke to. It's a short list of people that I would really choose to collaborate with. And I felt such an instant connection with him. I felt a kindred spirit. I felt a sense of trust. My defining question, when I look to collaboration, because it is embarking on a big journey, is would I go on a dangerous mission with this person? And I would go on any dangerous mission with RJ. He gave me that sense of being steady and reliable and dependable and solid and creative. And then I always think there's a little bit of serendipity or kismet in everything in life. And a lot of our film is about Elton recognizing those moments in his life. When RJ shared with me that he'd actually been at Madison Square Garden for the John Lennon concert in 1974, which is something Elton had always talked about as being a significant moment in his life. The fact that RJ had seen that, and that was the first concert you ever went to.
Yeah, I was 13 years old, and
I was like, okay, universe has just sent me the signal that I need. This is the person to collaborate with.
I actually, that's one of the things I wanted to bring up. I am a huge fan of John Lennon and of Elton John, and I'll be honest, I did not know about that event until I saw the doc and was floored by this. So talk a little bit about, talk about that moment, because and the importance of that moment for and trying to get footage and you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, having been there, and it was the very first concert I went to. I was 13 years old. I had to commit grand larceny and forgery in order to get a ticket. You know, in those days there was no secondary ticket market. You either somehow magically had a ticket to Madison Square Garden or you didn't. And I was a kid who needed to be at that concert, and I did everything I could, and I got a ticket. And I went, and when John Lennon came out on stage, of course, which nobody knew was going to happen, it was a feeling and an experience that I think nobody in the building had ever felt before. The Madison Square Garden was shaking, and Elton says to this day he's never heard an audience louder, and describes, as you see in the movie, that he and the band were in tears. It was Lennon hadn't been in New York since Shea Stadium in 1966, I think. Yeah. He had been out of the city on the Lost Weekend for over a year. He and Yoko were separated. That would change that night. They came back together again that night, in large part through Elton's arranging for Yoko to be there. Sean was conceived that night. If you do the math and count 9 months, he was born pretty much to the day, 9 months after Thanksgiving, 1974. Elton, of course, is Sean's godfather. And their relationship, Elton and John's relationship, for us, really, I mean, he had so many extraordinary relationships with so many. His life had changed. You know, he says in the film he was a boy who would cycle to get the new Beatles album from his home in Pinner, and now here he was performing. John Lennon was on his stage, and they were singing. I saw her standing there and singing the song that he had helped John Lennon make into a #1 hit. Lennon didn't even know it would be a #1 hit, but Elton knew. And so for so many reasons, this was one of the most extraordinary nights of Elton's life, and to be able to recreate it in the film was just such a thrill. We got every picture, we got every frame. You know, nobody had cameras in those days. You couldn't bring a camera in, but there's enough people who snuck their cameras in and held on to their footage from that night, and also enough still photographs that we could recreate the whole evening. And we had this amazing audio recording of it, so you could feel like you're there.
These were bits and pieces we'd had in our archive. Sorry, these were bits and pieces we'd had in our archive, but had never really been taken out. And when I saw the first edit of it, I thought the work that had been done to capture the magic and the spirit and the energy with really limited scrap bits of footage and photography and that wonderful audio track, it's now been preserved for history, and it is such a historically significant moment in both their professional and personal histories. That it's now been preserved forever, which is the great thing about film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reason alone just to watch you know what I mean? Just to watch a film just for that stuff.
Well, that Elton John friendship, romance, love was so important. And that night was a turning point, because it was the night that John Lennon kind of became a dad and recommitted to his family. The change that would come to Elton some years later.
And found true happiness in his life before we sadly lost him.
Yeah, and the last performance of his life.
It's everything about it. Like I said, there were so many things I learned that I didn't know. And again, I'm a fan. So I have to ask you, as a co-director, and it's an unusual thing because you are manager, husband, father, like you're so involved in Elton's life, and also with the film. Like, you show your kids in the film a little bit, but how much, like, where was that line for you of, this is too personal, what am I willing to show as a director and as a dad?
I think Elton and I were both very protective of our sons. We actively don't promote them in the media. If we put pictures of our family life on social media, we don't show their faces, we show them from behind. And we also try to show them in everyday situations, because I think the world can benefit from a message of, hey, this is a family just like any other family, and their kids do stuff that everyone else does, and they seem to be really happy. I think we have as advocates, I think we have, and role models, I think we have a responsibility to at least not hide the children away completely, but have a very controlled narrative. So it was important to me in this film. Obviously, if you're going to show that Elton's coming off the road, and the real reason he's coming off the road is the love of family, the children have to be in it. The challenge was only one of our two sons actually likes being filmed. The other one doesn't like being filmed at all. And we had numerous times where the crew would come in, or I would even pick up my phone and try to capture stuff. And my older son would be, "You're filming me, aren't you? I don't want to be filmed." He just would completely shut down. And the magical moment that we got, and this is what I love about documentaries, when you get these gifts from the heavens. Elton's sitting in the studio and he has that FaceTime call with his sons. Zachary would never have done that on camera. But the fact that's just the way he and his daddy talk, and then he and his brother poking fun with each other and playing around like every other kid does. There's so much in that phone call. You can see how they're brothers. You can see how they're active and involved and committed in school stuff like every other kid. And you can see how much Elton absolutely adores his sons and was determined based on his own childhood. He said, when we had Zachary and then we had Elijah, he said, "I don't want my children to know fear." He said, "Every day I came home from school, every time I came back home, it was like walking on eggshells." And he mentions that in the documentary. And you can see the culture around our sons. It's loving, it's positive. He tells them he loves them every single day. He compliments them. Elton as a child, by comparison, was always criticized and always put down and always told what he was doing wrong, and nothing was ever good enough, and he was collared around the ear. It's a very powerful contrast when you hear of Elton's childhood and you see that. And I was so happy that there's so much narrative content and so much deep life meaning just in that one little sequence. I did have to sit down with both boys at the end and screen the whole film for them and get their permission. Because when we started filming, they were, "Well, hang on a minute, we don't know if we want to be part of this." And I said, "Don't worry, we'll show you the whole film, and if there's anything you don't like, we will take it out."
How nervous were you before that first screen? Because that phone call is really important.
Yeah, and when they saw it, they were like, "Oh my God, we're so young. Oh, we're talking like babies. Oh, our friends are going to tease us about this. Oh, I would." And then in the end, we talked about the greater message that the film could put out, because we do talk with the boys about the fact that same-sex parenting is not everybody's cup of tea, and we do live in a world with a lot of judgment and a lot of homophobia. They don't get it. They're like, how could people be so wrong? Because they're perfectly happy in their situation. But the fact that a scene like that in a film can be a very powerful piece of advocacy. And it could maybe change people's minds and maybe make people think more positively about. I cannot tell you the number of times I've gone out socially. And this is in the earlier days when we had the boys, and I would sit next to prominent societal people and people I would think who were very intelligent and very well read. And they'd go, "Oh, I hear you have children." And then I would just start talking about my kids like anyone else talks about their kids, with pride, and I'd have photos on my phone and stuff. And I can't tell you, it's 3 or 4 times with people who I thought would be more, I guess, evolved socially. People have said, "Wow, I didn't think it was right when you and Elton had kids, but now that I've sat next to you at this dinner and I see how much you love your children, it's absolutely right that your kids." So that you've had kids. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of preconceived notions out there.
The other thing that's so important about that phone call scene, of course, is that you feel how much Elton misses his boys.
Sure.
And you can feel that, in a way, that yearning to be reunited, which of course is his journey through the film. He's giving something up, something we refer to kind of as his last great addiction, which is performing and touring. He's giving that up in order to be able to be with the thing he wants most, which is his children and his family. And then there's another really important moment with the kids in the film, of course, which is this simple moment at the end when they come out on stage with David. And it's it's completely uninflected. It's a dad calling a dad calling his family out to say thank you. But what you're seeing is this completely normal family in this great moment of joy and gratitude. And to see these two dads and their two boys, these beautiful boys, is a really powerful emotional moment.
And that was something that Elton and I deliberately didn't build up with the boys. Like, it was only a day or two before the final Dodgers show. He said, I had this idea. How would you guys feel about maybe just coming on stage with me? Because I just want people to know this is why I'm coming off the road and to see how happy I am. And they're like, well, why would you do that? And they were very guarded and very protected. So we played it down. They were in the audience every night. They knew what was going on around them with those tens of thousands of people. And it took a little bit of reassuring, but it was truly spontaneous. It was not something we said, right, kids, we're going to take you on stage and this is what you have to do and this is how you have to behave. I just said, be yourself. I said, you're getting your daddy back full time. Show the world how that feels. And that was all I said to them. And they rose to the occasion magnificently.
So I love talking about editing because it's where it all comes together. So how long, if I may ask, was like your first cut of this movie? And did you ever think you'd get it shorter?
Well, it's always long, and you never think you're going to get it shorter. The first cut was probably about 3 hours, 3:15. Not so bad. No. I mean, I've done worse. The first cut of Billie Eilish was 27 hours.
Are you joking?
So, yes, I'm not joking. It's a delightful 27 hours. If you have the time, come on over. I'll show it to you.
Okay. In all my years of talking to directors about assembly cuts and edits, I have never heard anything above Peter Jackson on the Beatles.
Yeah.
Maybe his first cut, he told me, was like 12 hours or 15. I've never heard 27.
Well, there you go. Billy had a lot to say.
I'm like, wow.
And especially someone so early on in their life journey.
Yes, it was. And I'm telling you, it was very compelling. If you watch it in 5-hour chunks over the course of a week, it's a very satisfying cut. With this, we were about...
I am like, oh my God. Like, sorry.
And it came down. It came down beautifully. It's like a sauce of these films. You're making a reduction. There are two metaphors I always use. One is the sauce reduction, and you're finding the essence until it tastes just right. And the other is the block of clay, where you're carving away to see what it wants to be and what shape it wants to take. So you asked, did we ever think we would get it down? Thank goodness for my experience, because whether I think we're going to get it down or not, which of course I think we're never going to get it down, but I know in my heart it will come down the way all the films do, and they reduce, and you find the sculpture within the block of clay.
I also think, as a filmmaker, no one ever leaves the cinema and goes, wow, that was too short. Like, I always like to leave the audience with a sense that you pack something with a lot of information and a lot of emotion in a sensible time frame. There's so much long form cinema and so much long form content now. Some of it's absolutely appropriate and fits with the subject matter really, really well. But I think pacing and keeping an audience fully engaged and keeping the energy is super important.
Well, the thing about, though, with Elton is, like, I'm a big fan, and I don't mind seeing more concert footage, or I don't mind seeing certain other things. So it's a question of, like, ultimately, what's the story you're saying? Which leads me to my next question. You spend a lot of, it's basically the Dodger Stadium, like building to Dodger Stadium and stuff in the 70s, in the early 70s. How did you guys figure out, like, sort of what the storyline was going to be?
This was a conversation. David referred to the very first conversation we had when we were talking about maybe working together. And I think in large part of why we knew that this was going to be a successful collaboration is in that very first conversation, David said, I think it should be shaped around the final tour. And I said, and if that's the spine, the nerves will be the first 5 years. Because I'd always thought those those first 5 years would, what a prolific time period, time of artistic explosion that Elton went through. And you have to remember, this was a time when the Beatles had broken up, the Stones weren't touring, they were having their own problems, people had died, Janis Joplin had died, Jimi Hendrix had died. Nobody really knew where the music industry and pop music was going. And along comes Elton John with this extraordinary explosion, 14 albums in 5 years.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. 7 of them go to #1. Songs that we now consider to be the classic songs. I mean, you're talking about from the Elton John album to Captain Fantastic, all of those albums in that time period. And it's a 5-year time period. Plus, he's making this monumental decision about his life, which is to come out to Rolling Stone. He almost dies on the road. And on the road to that, he almost dies at the age of 27, the same age that all those other rock stars died early and too young. And Elton is able to save his life and put it on the track that he wants it to be on. And we discussed in that very first conversation that decision could parallel the decision he's making now to come on the road. So that, when you can have that kind of a incredible collaborative conversation, creative conversation in your first meeting with great comfort, I mean, who would not want to pursue this?
And I was particularly excited about the opportunity. I see the numbers behind Elton's music, which is one of the benefits of streaming today. And nearly 60% of his music is now streamed by 18 to 35-year-olds, which is not like his contemporaries. So there's a whole young group of people out there discovering these songs. I don't think they have any idea of the history behind them. I don't think they realize the intensity of the creative process. I don't think they realize how monumental it was for Elton to come out in 1976. What a different place the world was, and what a tremendous, tremendous risk that was.
You should really emphasize that, because it was a dangerous time to come out.
Absolutely.
And he was also at the height of his fame.
Yes.
Biggest star in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So people were not coming out.
Yeah.
Nobody came out.
He risked his career.
But also people, it's more common now for people to come out, but it's still people won't come out because there's that risk to their career.
Yes.
And this is 50 years later.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it was good to give young people that context. Also, Elton is very passionate about the fact that success in music is not overnight. It is a craft. It is a passion. It is something that you learn and that you work at and that you develop. And when you look at those years as a young child going into the Royal Academy of Music, getting a foundation of classical music training, deciding rock and roll is my future, and then becoming a session musician, playing 3 and 4 shows a night for other artists, and going into studios and recording on other people's records. All of that foundation that Elton put in place. Yeah, the Troubadour looks like overnight success, but the reality is everything Elton had done in his life up until that point prepared him for that opportunity, so that when he had the chance, he landed way bigger than he ever expected to. And then he just kept running and kept working and kept, writing and creating and touring and performing. It's unfortunate, some of the reality television shows around music think that you can have a lasting career in music if you just go on TV and sing, karaoke and sing someone else's hit. There's no foundation there in which a career can be sustained. So I hope that young people who have musical aspirations can watch and feel from Elton's journey, okay, I got work to do. There's things I need to learn. There's lots of opportunities that I need to step into. Our world is so instant now. And people sometimes get attracted to just the fame and the glory side, when in fact it's a craft that you learn.
I always try to explain to people, it's great television, but it's not a great music career.
Absolutely.
Look at Chapel now. Look at Chapel Roan. How many the decade that she put in?
100%.
And that's why she's so extraordinary.
Yeah. So I'm just about out of time, and so individual questions. I know you're involved in about 72 projects. So what are a few of them that you are working on that are far out? Not the one that's coming tomorrow.
Well, I will say coming tomorrow, in addition to the Elton John film, is a film I've just completed about Martha Stewart. Stewart that's going to be on Netflix in the fall, and we're very excited and honored about that as well. And we have a number of different films coming up, a movie about the man who invented K-pop, the Korean futurist and a genius, Lee Soo-man, somebody who's not known in America but will be after this film. Just an incredible story about how he invented this part of pop music that has taken over the world.
Lou Pearlman, but not bad.
Well, it won't compare them at all. Won't compare them at all.
I'm teasing, but you know.
We're working with our dear friends at Imagine Entertainment and Major League Baseball on a project about this year's World Series that I'm very excited about, and soon we'll be able to announce our distribution partner as well. There are a lot of great projects that we're just. It's a thrilling time in documentary. I compare it to the 1970s in narrative filmmaking, where artists are really expanding the form, spreading their wings, building up their muscles, telling incredible stories. And, I'm just honored to be part of the documentary filmmaking community.
And a question about Elton John and like what could be coming in the future, because I'm assuming over the years you guys have recorded so much stuff. And is there plans for like more concert films or things like that? Or
Elton is most inspired by new creation. That is what excites him the most. We have 2 stage musicals opening this year. We have The Devil Wears Prada, which we've been working on for over 8 years in London, which is going to have its world premiere on the 1st of December, World AIDS Day. And we're very excited about that. And we have a musical that we've been working on for 14 years about the life of Tammy Faye Baker, the televangelist. And we opened that in a very limited capacity at the Almeida Theatre in London, which is only a 300-seat theater. We did it very much off the radar and said this isn't the next big Elton John musical, because we wanted it to find its feet and get a sense of how audiences would respond. We sold out almost immediately, got fantastic reviews, and now we're going to open on Broadway in the newly restored Palace Theater in November. So that's just 2 irons that we have in the fire at the moment. Elton, I know, wants to write and record and continue to develop new stuff. He doesn't sit on an archive of unreleased recordings that he's dying to put out. He always does one album at a time. It is very much something that exists in its own right, and if it doesn't make it onto the album, then in his mind it shouldn't be on the album and it shouldn't be released publicly. So Elton is the least nostalgic person I know. I think the thing that he would find difficult would be to sort of say, oh, let's keep going back and looking at the past. Let's keep unearthing things that haven't been seen or done before. I was so thrilled with this documentary. We had an opportunity to do that with the archive footage that we have and the audio tapes, Elton's handwritten diaries that serendipitously found their way back to us a few years ago. Elton had forgotten he'd done them, and they are literally a handwritten day-by-day account of the rise of one of the most important and successful careers in music history. He's like a shark. He has to keep moving forward to stay alive. It's what feeds him. It's what thrives him. His radio shows, absolutely loves doing them. He's doing lots of work on the side in terms of, Chapel Roan, for example. He played Pink Pony Club over a year ago when that single came out. Got her number, called her, and has stayed in touch with her ever since, and it sort of checks in from time to time because he watches the charts every day. He doesn't do it for kudos. He does it because he cares about the future of young artists, and he sees people with talent and potential. And he calls her up and he says, okay, your album's about to break. Really? Oh yeah, I'm watching the numbers. I know how this works. I know how the charts work. You're getting the right amount of ads. This is hanging around. This is your lead single. And so he does that for love. He does that for love of craft. And he does it because he remembers all of the artists when he was starting out, like Leon Russell, like Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, like George Harrison, who reached out to Elton to say, or Dylan to reach out to him to say, I love what you do. Have you thought of doing this? Or just kind of giving him the nudge and the nods that he needed to continue to propel him in the right direction.
I have to ask you one last thing, and then I really have to let you leave. I am so curious about Devil Wears Prada. What can you tease about this?
If you love the film, you'll love the show. Vanessa Williams is playing Miranda Priestley, and she is terrific. Vanessa's a beautiful singer and a fantastic actress. The songs sound very much like Elton John songs. It's a really great, fun, sonic pop soundtrack. Clothes look great. As they should do. And our director is Jerry Mitchell, who did Kinky Boots, who's a fantastic director, choreographer. So visually everything holds together. It's cohesive and really well, and it's fun. There's so much negative stuff in our world right now. We wanted to create a show that people could go to the theater, sit back in their seat, and have a good time and laugh and just enjoy themselves.
Can I ask just how many songs are in the thing?
Off the top of my head, I would probably say there's at least 14. And it's hard for me because songs come in and come out and they change, and we'll work on the show until the night that the critics come in. You're always with musicals polishing the jewel constantly, and looking at ways of reconfiguring and doing things. So it's why I'm not on my toes saying we have this number of songs.
It doesn't come out, you said, till December 1st.
We're going to open, our gala opening is 1st of December in London at the Dominion Theatre, which is a big, beautiful theater.
And if I may, and on the subject of new Elton material, as you know from having seen the film, there's the closing credits song that he and Brandy Carlisle wrote and perform that is called Never Too Late. And we took the film's name from that song. And what a beautiful, beautiful song it is that encapsulates all of the themes of the film so well.
And that came from not last summer, but the summer before. Elton and Brandy are close friends. Our families holiday together. They were staying with us, and I shared a very rough edit of the film with Brandy because he's been her musical North Star her entire life. And I know how much she knows about Elton musical history, and I just wanted to get her feedback on the film. And she was so inspired, she wrote that lyric. Said to Elton, I just saw the film and this is what this film's about, and asked Elton if he wanted to write to it, and he did. And we have a wonderful song closing our film now.
On that note, I will say that the film will be available. It's here premiering at the Toronto Film Festival, but it will be on Disney Plus December, I forget the date.
13th.
And a month before in theaters.
And there we go. Listen, congrats on this. Thank you for doing what you do, and more interviews from Toronto soon.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.